You don't belong here. This cabin wasn't built for people like you. The senior flight attendant's finger pointed toward economy class, her voice dripping with disgust at the man in the torn hoodie sitting in first class. Every passenger watched as she called security, confiscated his black American Express card, and laughed in his face. What she didn't know, what would destroy her life in exactly 10 minutes, was that the homeless-looking man she was humiliating owned the entire airline. But the real twist? She knew who he was all along. This was a trap, and 73 employees were about to lose everything in the most shocking corporate takedown ever filmed at 37,000 feet. Before we expose how 73 airline employees destroyed their careers in a single flight, drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from right now. I guarantee someone from your area has faced this same discrimination. And if you believe people like this deserve to be exposed, hit that subscribe button, because Waves of Justice brings you these shocking true stories every single week. Now, let's get into what happened at 37,000 feet that changed the airline industry forever. You don't belong here. This cabin wasn't built for people like you. The words sliced through the first-class cabin of Skybridge Airlines like a blade through silk. Veronica Hale, senior flight attendant with 17 years of polished service, stood rigid in the aisle, her manicured finger pointing toward the economy section. Her voice carried that practiced authority that came from years of deciding who deserved champagne and who got pretzels. She didn't whisper. She didn't lower her tone. She wanted every passenger in first class to hear exactly what she was saying to the man in seat 1A. What Veronica didn't know, what none of the crew could have imagined, was that in exactly 10 minutes, the rumpled man she was humiliating would not only own her termination papers, but would stand in that very aisle and fire every single crew member who had joined in her performance. Before we continue with what happened at 37,000 feet above the Pacific, tell me where you're watching from today. Drop your city in the comments below. And if you've ever been judged by someone who thought your clothes told your whole story, hit that subscribe button right now, because Waves of Justice has something special for you today. Dmitry Volkov had walked through Denver International Airport's Terminal C wearing what his ex-wife once called his invisible man uniform, a faded University of Colorado hoodie with a small coffee stain on the sleeve, jeans that had seen better decades, and tennis shoes that looked like they'd survived a marathon through mud. His salt and pepper beard hadn't met a trimmer in weeks, and his reading glasses, held together with electrical tape at the bridge, completed the picture of a man who'd given up on first impressions. But behind those broken glasses were eyes that had built an empire from a single regional route to 47 international destinations. He'd boarded Skybridge Flight 782 to Singapore, just like any other passenger, showing his digital boarding pass to Bryce Kellerman, the eager junior attendant, whose smile flickered like a dying light bulb when he saw the first-class seat assignment. Bryce had immediately turned to find Veronica, who was arranging champagne flutes with the precision of a surgeon. Their whispered conference lasted 12 seconds, just long enough for other passengers to notice something was wrong. The morning had started differently for Dmitry. 3 hours earlier, he'd sat in his penthouse office overlooking the Rocky Mountains, reviewing complaint files that his executive assistant, Helena Frost, had marked as concerning. 7 discrimination complaints in the past month alone, all from Skybridge flights, all mysteriously marked as resolved without merit. He'd made a decision right then, pulling on his oldest clothes and heading to the airport without his usual entourage, without the black car, without anything that would mark him as the man who'd purchased Skybridge Airlines 3 years ago after his nephew had been thrown off a flight for looking suspicious in a hoodie remarkably similar to the one Dmitry now wore. Veronica Hale approached seat 1A with the measured steps of someone who believed she was about to restore order to her universe. Her navy blazer remained perfectly pressed even after 2 hours of pre-flight preparations, and her name tag caught the cabin lights like a badge of authority. Behind her, Bryce followed like a shadow, his tablet clutched against his chest as if it contained evidence of a crime. The other passengers in first class had started to lower their newspapers and pause their conversations, drawn to the unfolding drama like moths to a flame. "Excuse me, sir," Veronica said, her voice carrying that fake sweetness that customer service trains into people right before they destroy someone's day. "I'm afraid there's been a terrible mistake with your seat assignment. This is first class, and your ticket appears to be for economy." She hadn't even looked at his boarding pass. She'd made her decision based entirely on the hoodie, the beard, and the broken glasses. Dmitri slowly raised his eyes from the aviation magazine he'd been pretending to read, meeting her gaze with the calm of someone who'd sat through 1,000 board meetings where someone tried to push him out. "There's no mistake," Dmitri replied quietly, holding up his phone with the QR code clearly displaying 1A, first class, confirmed and paid. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." His voice carried a slight Eastern European accent, softened by decades in America, but still noticeable when he was controlling his emotions. Veronica's smile tightened like a violin string about to snap. She turned to Bryce, who fumbled with his tablet, scanning the passenger manifest with increasing desperation. "Sir, sometimes these discount booking sites make errors," Bryce offered, his voice cracking slightly. He was 26, fresh from Flight Attendant Academy, still believing that seniority meant wisdom. "They sell seats that aren't actually available, especially in premium cabins. It happens more than you'd think to." He paused, looking Dmitri up and down. People trying to upgrade beyond their means. From seat 2B, Natasha Cortez had already pulled out her phone. She ran a travel blog called Mile High Truth, with 3 million followers who loved her brutal honesty about airline experiences. She'd started recording the moment Veronica's voice had turned sharp, recognizing the familiar tune of discrimination playing out in real time. Across the aisle in 2A, Raymond Ito, a corporate lawyer heading to a merger meeting in Singapore, shifted uncomfortably. He'd seen this before, been on the receiving end himself, 15 years ago, when he was a young attorney in a borrowed suit. Veronica wasn't backing down. She leaned closer to Dmitri, lowering her voice just enough to seem conspiratorial, but still loud enough for the cabin to hear. "Sir, I'm going to be very honest with you. First class has certain standards. Our passengers expect a level of presentation. You're making other guests uncomfortable. I can offer you a complimentary beverage if you voluntarily move to your correct seat in economy." Dimitri's fingers tightened slightly on the magazine, the only sign that Veronica's words had landed exactly where she'd aimed them. The cabin had gone completely silent now, that uncomfortable quiet that happens when everyone knows something wrong is happening, but nobody wants to be the first to speak up. He set the magazine down carefully on his tray table and looked around the first-class cabin, taking in the 32 seats filled with people in designer suits and expensive watches, most of whom were now pretending to be fascinated by their phones or the safety card in the seat pocket. "Making people uncomfortable," Dmitri repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Because of my hoodie? Or is it something else?" He stood up then, not aggressively, just stretching to his full 6'2" height, and Veronica took an instinctive step back. That's when Captain Patricia Sterling emerged from the cockpit, her 4 stripes gleaming with authority. She was 55, had been flying for Skybridge since before Dmitri bought the company, though she didn't know that. Her expression showed she'd already picked a side before hearing a word of the situation. "What seems to be the problem here?" Patricia asked, though her eyes were fixed on Dmitri, like he was a storm cloud on her weather radar. Veronica straightened, reinforced by the captain's presence. "Captain Sterling, this gentleman is refusing to move from a first-class seat. He claims to have a ticket, but his appearance and behavior suggest possible fraud. I've asked him politely to relocate." Bryce jumped in, eager to support his mentor. "He's being resistant and aggressive, Captain. For the safety and comfort of our premium passengers, I think we should involve ground security." The word aggressive hung in the air like an accusation. Dmitri hadn't raised his voice, hadn't made a single threatening gesture, had literally just stood up from his seat. But suddenly he was aggressive. Suddenly he was a safety concern. That's when Eleanor Zhao spoke up from seat 3C. She was 81 years old, had been flying first class since before Veronica was born, and had zero patience for bullies in any uniform. "Excuse me, Captain," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd lived through actual problems. "This man has done nothing aggressive. He showed his boarding pass. He's sitting in his assigned seat. The only disturbance here is being created by your crew." Veronica's face flushed red. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but we're trained to identify potential security issues. This is for everyone's protection." She turned back to Dmitri, her voice hardening. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your identification and credit card. We need to verify that the payment method matches the passenger name." Dmitri reached for his wallet slowly, aware that every eye in the cabin was on him. He pulled out his driver's license and the metal American Express Centurion card, the black card that only goes to people who spend more in a year than most people make in 5. He held them out to Veronica, who took them with 2 fingers like they might be contaminated. Veronica stared at the black American Express card like it had personally insulted her. The Centurion card wasn't just rare, it was invitation only, reserved for people who spent millions annually. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held it up to the light, searching for any sign it might be fake. Behind her, Bryce's eyes widened. He'd only seen one of these cards once before, when a Fortune 500 CEO had flown their route to Tokyo. But that CEO had worn a 3-piece suit, not a stained hoodie from a college gift shop. "This has to be stolen," Veronica declared, loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "No one who actually owns a Centurion card would dress like this. Bryce, call ground security immediately and contact the credit card company. We need to verify this isn't fraud." She pocketed both the license and the credit card, sliding them into her blazer pocket with a satisfied nod. "You'll get these back when the authorities clear them, if they clear them." From the back of first class, Marcus Steinberg, who ran a chain of luxury hotels across the Pacific Northwest, stood up slowly. "That's theft," he said clearly. "You just stole that man's property. I'm recording this entire interaction, and what you're doing is illegal. Give him back his cards immediately." Marcus had his phone raised, the red recording light visible to everyone. Veronica spun toward him, her composure starting to crack. "Sir, please sit down. Interfering with crew member duties is a federal offense. I could have you arrested." But Marcus didn't sit. Instead, 3 more passengers stood up, all with their phones out, all recording. Natasha from 2B was already live streaming to her 3 million followers, narrating in real time. "Folks, you're watching discrimination at 30,000 feet, Natasha said into her phone. "A passenger in first class is being harassed because he's wearing casual clothes. The flight attendant just stole his credit card and ID. This is Skybridge Airlines, Flight 782. Remember this." Captain Sterling raised her voice, trying to regain control. "Everyone needs to sit down immediately, or I'll have this entire cabin deplaned." She turned to Dmitri, her jaw set. "Sir, for the safety of this flight, I'm going to need you to comply with my crew's instructions. Move to the economy section now, and we can sort this out after landing." Dimitri remained standing perfectly still, his voice eerily calm. "Captain Sterling. Patricia Sterling. Employee number 447829. Hired June 2007. Senior Captain, Denver Hub. Spotless record until today." Patricia's face went white. How did this stranger know her employee number? Her hire date? Dimitri continued. "Veronica Hale, employee number 338924. 17 years of service. 3 customer complaints this month alone, all involving passengers she deemed inappropriate for first class." The cabin fell absolutely silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. Veronica's hand instinctively went to her name tag, covering her employee number that wasn't even displayed there. Bryce dropped his tablet, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing through the cabin like a gunshot. "How do you know that?" Veronica's voice came out as barely a whisper, but in the silent cabin, everyone heard it. Her face had gone from red to pale in seconds, like someone had drained all the confidence out of her with a syringe. Dimitri reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out his phone, and typed a single message. "Initiate Protocol 7. He held the phone so only Veronica could see it, then hit send. Within 3 seconds, Veronica's phone buzzed, then Bryce's, then Captain Sterling's, then every Skybridge employee phone in a 50-foot radius lit up with an emergency notification from corporate headquarters. The message was simple, but devastating. "All crew of Flight 782 report to corporate video conference immediately. Board of Directors emergency session now in progress." Patricia fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking as she read the message. "This is impossible. Only the CEO can initiate Protocol 7. Only the owner of the airline." Her voice died as the pieces clicked together in her mind. She looked at Dimitri, really looked at him for the first time, past the hoodie and the beard and the broken glasses. "No," Veronica said, backing away until she hit the galley wall. "No, you're not. You can't be. Dmitry Volkov doesn't fly commercial. He has a private jet. He wouldn't." But even as she spoke, she was remembering the company newsletter from 3 years ago, the announcement of the acquisition, the photo of the new owner who'd promised to revolutionize Skybridge Airlines from the inside out. Dimitri pulled up another app on his phone and turned the screen toward the cabin. It showed a live feed of Skybridge's main boardroom in Seattle. 12 board members sat around a polished table, all staring at a large screen that showed, to everyone's horror, the first-class cabin of Flight 782. They'd been watching everything. Every word, every insult, every moment of discrimination had been broadcast directly to the people who controlled the fate of every employee on that plane. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dimitri said, addressing not just the cabin, but the board members watching remotely. "What you've just witnessed is exactly why I bought this airline. My nephew, Alexei, was thrown off a Skybridge flight 3 years ago because a flight attendant decided his hoodie made him look dangerous. He was 17, heading to his mother's funeral. He missed saying goodbye because someone decided clothes determine character." Helena Frost's voice came through his phone speaker, clear and professional. "Mr. Volkov, we have the employment files ready for review. Should I proceed with the termination protocols?" The entire first-class cabin could hear her. Several passengers gasped. Raymond Ito from 2A slowly lowered his phone, his lawyer instincts telling him he was witnessing something that would make legal history. Veronica's legs gave out. She slumped against the galley counter, still clutching Dimitri's ID and credit card in her trembling hand. "Please," she whispered. "I have 3 kids. I didn't know. I was just following. I thought..." but her voice faded as she realized she had no defense that would matter now. Dmitri held up his hand, silencing Veronica's plea. 3 kids, he repeated, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone lean forward. Interesting that you remember your children now. Did you think about Alexei's mother when you made him miss her funeral? Did you think about the black nurse last month, who you moved to economy because her scrubs didn't meet your standards? She was flying to her father's heart surgery. Or the teacher from Guatemala 2 weeks ago, who you accused of stealing his first-class seat. He'd saved for 3 years for that anniversary trip with his wife. The board members on the screen shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a silver-haired woman named Victoria Chen, spoke through the phone. Mr. Volkov, we've pulled the complaint files. There are 47 incidents involving this crew combination in the past 8 months, all mysteriously marked as resolved. 47, Dmitri repeated, letting the number hang in the air like a prison sentence. He turned to look at the other flight attendants who had started gathering near the galley. There was Penelope Cross, who'd been whispering with Veronica earlier. Nathan Torres, who'd walked past 3 times, each time glaring at Dmitri. Sarah Blackwood, who'd actually laughed when Veronica had said he didn't belong there. Penelope Cross, Dmitri said, and the blonde attendant froze mid-step. Employee number 445231. You were part of the crew that removed a Syrian doctor from first class last month. He was wearing traditional clothing. You told him it made other passengers nervous. That doctor was flying to Seattle to perform a life-saving surgery on a child. The surgery had to be postponed. Penelope's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She looked to Veronica for help, but Veronica was still slumped against the counter, staring at nothing. Captain Sterling tried one last attempt at authority. Mr. Volkov, if you really are who you say you are, surely we can discuss this after landing. These passengers don't need to witness. These passengers are witnesses, Dmitri interrupted. They've been witnesses to discrimination that Skybridge has hidden for years. Nathan Torres, you're wondering if I know about you? I do. The complaint from the elderly Korean couple you separated because you said they were speaking too loudly in their native language. They were discussing their granddaughter's wedding. Sarah Blackwood, the young entrepreneur from Morocco, you had removed because his cologne was too strong for first class. It was oud, worth more per ounce than your monthly salary. Marcus Steinberg from the back of first class spoke up again. I knew something was wrong with this airline. I fly twice a month, and I've seen this happen before. I complained once, and they told me the matter was resolved internally. Now I know what that means. It means nothing happened. Eleanor Zhao, the elderly woman from 3C, stood up shakily. Young man, she said to Dmitri, though he was clearly in his 40s. My husband faced this same treatment in 1987 on another airline. He was a physicist, heading to receive a Nobel Prize nomination, and they made him sit in the back because his English had an accent. I thought we'd moved past this. I thought things had changed. Dmitri's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He answered it on speaker, and a nervous voice filled the cabin. Mr. Volkov, this is Daniel Harrington from Legal. We've just uncovered something significant. There's a WhatsApp group called Sky High Standards, with 73 Skybridge employees. They've been sharing photos of passengers they want removed from premium cabins. Veronica Hale is the group administrator. The blood drained completely from Veronica's face. She lunged forward, trying to grab Dmitri's phone, but Raymond Ito stepped between them. That's assault, the lawyer said calmly. I'd think very carefully about your next move. Veronica stumbled backward, her perfect composure finally shattered completely. Pull it up on the main screen, Dmitri told the board. Within seconds, the boardroom's display changed to show screenshot after screenshot of the WhatsApp conversations. The first-class passengers could see it reflected on Dmitri's phone screen as he held it up. The messages were worse than anyone could have imagined. Indian family in 2B and 2C moved them to economy. Said the system had an error. Read one message from Veronica, dated 3 weeks ago. Another from Bryce. Guy with neck tattoos in first class told him there was a mechanical issue with his seat. LOL, his face when he walked to the back. The messages went on and on, each one a confession of deliberate discrimination, each one celebrated with laughing emojis and congratulations from other crew members. There's more, Daniel's voice continued. We found communications between Veronica and Robert Fitzgerald, the VP of Customer Experience. He's been deleting the complaints and marking them as resolved. He's been protecting this group for over 2 years. Gasps echoed through the cabin. This wasn't just a few bad employees. It was systematic, organized, and protected from the highest levels. Natasha, still live streaming, turned her camera to face herself. Friends, what we're witnessing isn't just discrimination. It's a conspiracy. Skybridge Airlines has been systematically removing passengers from first class based on their appearance, race, and perceived economic status. And they've been covering it up at the executive level. This is massive. Captain Sterling finally found her voice, though it came out weak and desperate. Mr. Volkov, I had no knowledge of this group. I've never participated in any discrimination. I was just backing up my crew, following standard protocol for dealing with disputes. She pulled off her captain's hat, holding it against her chest like a shield. Standard protocol, Dmitri repeated, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Tell me, Captain, what's the standard protocol when a passenger shows a valid boarding pass? Because I have your training manual right here on my phone, and it says to scan the pass, verify it in the system, and seat the passenger. It doesn't say to judge their clothing. It doesn't say to steal their identification. It doesn't say to humiliate them in front of 32 other passengers. Bryce suddenly bolted for the plane's door, but it was sealed for departure. He turned back, trapped, his face red and sweating through his uniform. This isn't fair, he shouted, all pretense of professionalism gone. We were just maintaining standards. First class is supposed to be exclusive. That's what passengers pay for. They don't want to sit next to people who look like they crawled out of a homeless shelter. The entire cabin gasped at his words. Even some of the passengers who'd been quietly supporting the crew looked shocked. Marcus Steinberg lowered his phone and said, Did you just call this man, this homeless-looking? This man who probably owns a significant portion of your company stock? Homeless, Dmitri said, letting the word echo through the cabin like a bell tolling someone's professional death. You know what's interesting about that word, Bryce? When I started my first airline with 1 leased aircraft and 2 routes, I was sleeping in my office because I'd invested every penny into the business. I wore the same hoodie for 6 months straight because buying new clothes meant not making payroll for my 7 employees. So yes, I've been homeless by your definition. And now I own every seat on this plane, including the one you're standing next to. Victoria Chen's voice came through the speaker again. Mr. Volkov, we've found something else. Robert Fitzgerald has been running a side business. He's been selling first-class upgrades to his personal contacts at discounted rates, and then having crew members like Veronica remove legitimate passengers to make room. The money went to an offshore account. We're looking at potential fraud charges exceeding $2 million. Veronica's legs completely gave out. She collapsed onto the jump seat, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't hold on to anything. Robert said it was approved, she whispered. He said the company knew. He said we were protecting the brand image. He promised us bonuses He promised promotions. She looked up at Dmitri with tears streaming down her perfectly made-up face. He said you knew about it. I bought this airline 3 years ago, Dmitri said, his voice cold as winter steel. And I've been receiving sanitized reports ever since. Every complaint buried, every incident explained away, every discrimination lawsuit settled quietly with NDAs. But I knew something was wrong. The customer satisfaction scores didn't match the revenue. First-class bookings were dropping among diverse travelers. So I decided to see for myself. Helena Frost's voice came through the phone. Mr. Volkov, should I initiate the termination sequence? The formal word sounded like an execution order. Every Skybridge employee in the cabin stood frozen, waiting for the axe to fall. But Dmitri held up his hand for silence and looked around the first-class cabin at all the passengers who'd witnessed this humiliation. I want every passenger here to know something, he said, addressing them directly. You've witnessed what happens when we allow prejudice to wear a uniform, when we let bias hide behind policy, when we give small people a little bit of power and watch them use it to feel big. Each of you had a choice today. Some of you spoke up. Some of you recorded. Some of you stood. But some of you sat silent. And silence is what let this cancer grow in my company. Raymond Ito stood up fully. Mr. Volkov, as an attorney, I want to offer my services pro bono to any passenger who's been discriminated against by this crew. This WhatsApp group constitutes evidence of deliberate, organized discrimination. This is a federal crime. He pulled out his business card and handed it to Dmitri. Harvard Law, class of 2009. I've won 12 discrimination cases against major airlines. I'd be honored to make it 13. Sarah Blackwood suddenly broke from the group of flight attendants and fell to her knees in the aisle. Please, Mr. Volkov, I'm a single mother. I have student loans. I was just following what everyone else was doing. Veronica trained me. She said this was how we maintain excellence. She said you wanted only the best people in first class. I didn't know it was wrong. I mean, I knew, but I thought this was the job. You thought the job was to judge people? Eleanor Zhao said from her seat, her elderly voice carrying surprising strength. My dear, I've lived through the Chinese Exclusion Act's aftermath, the internment camps, the civil rights movement. Every single person who participated in those shameful moments said the same thing. They were just following orders, just doing their job. Evil doesn't always wear a scary mask. Sometimes it wears a flight attendant's wings. Nathan Torres tried a different approach. Mr. Volkov, we can be better. Give us another chance. Implement training. We'll take sensitivity courses. We'll apologize to everyone we've wronged. Please, I have a mortgage. My wife is pregnant. We're expecting twins. He actually got on his knees next to Sarah, his hands clasped like he was praying. Dmitri looked down at Nathan Torres and Sarah Blackwood, both on their knees in the first-class aisle of the plane they'd turned into their personal kingdom of discrimination. His expression didn't soften. Instead, he pulled up another screen on his phone and showed it to the cabin. Nathan, you want mercy? Let me show you mercy. This is Marcus Coleman, age 19, computer science student at Denver University. 3 months ago, you had him removed from first class because you said his dreadlocks were unprofessional and might shed on the seats. He was flying to San Francisco for a tech interview at Google. He missed it because you made him wait for the next flight in economy. The screen changed to show a young black man in a hospital bed. Marcus tried to kill himself 2 weeks later. The Google job was his way out of poverty. His family had pooled money for that first-class ticket to make sure he arrived fresh for the interview. You didn't just move him to another seat. You crushed his dreams. He's alive, thank God, but he dropped out of college. He said in his note that if he wasn't good enough for an airplane seat, how could he ever be good enough for Silicon Valley? Sarah Blackwood, sobbing, became hysterical. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. Nathan Torres remained frozen on his knees, his mouth open, but no words coming out. The first-class cabin had become completely silent, except for Sarah's crying and the low hum of the aircraft systems. But wait, Dimitri continued, his voice gaining intensity. There's more mercy to show. Penelope Cross, remember the elderly Japanese couple you separated last month? The woman was Keiko Tanaka, a Hiroshima survivor, flying to Washington, D.C. to speak at the Smithsonian about her experiences. You told her that her poor English was disturbing other passengers. She spoke perfect English. She was merely speaking Japanese to her husband, who has Alzheimer's and no longer understands English. They moved to economy without complaint, because she'd faced far worse in her 91 years. But her husband had a panic attack in the cramped seat. He's now in a care facility, because the trauma triggered a severe cognitive decline. Penelope Cross slumped against the galley wall and slid down to the floor, her legs splayed out awkwardly, her perfect uniform wrinkling. I didn't know, she whispered over and over. I didn't know. I didn't know. You didn't care to know, said a new voice from the back of first class. A young woman in a Yale Medical School sweatshirt stood up. I'm Dr. Jessica Park. I've been sitting here watching this, and I need to speak. 6 months ago, I was on a Sky Bridge flight from Boston. Different crew, same treatment. I was returning from a 16-hour surgery rotation, wearing my scrubs, exhausted. They told me I looked too disheveled for first class. I had just saved 3 lives that day, and they made me feel worthless because of how I looked. Another passenger stood up, an older black man in construction boots and a paint-stained jacket. Jerome Washington, contractor from Oakland. Last year, your crew told me my work boots violated first-class dress code. I was flying to my daughter's wedding. I own a construction company with 300 employees. I could buy every seat on this plane, but they made me take off my boots and walk to economy in my socks because my footwear offended them. The testimonies started flowing like a dam had burst. A Native American woman shared how she was told her traditional jewelry was too noisy for first class. A young tech entrepreneur from Pakistan described being accused of having a suspicious accent. A disabled veteran revealed how he was questioned about whether he could really afford his seat when he boarded using his cane. Captain Patricia Sterling finally spoke again, her voice barely audible. Mr. Volkov, I knew. God help me. I knew something was wrong. But I told myself it wasn't my job to interfere with cabin service. I stayed in my cockpit and flew the plane and pretended I didn't hear the complaints. I'm supposed to be responsible for every soul on this aircraft, but I only protected the ones who looked like me. She pulled off her wings, the golden pins that marked her as captain, and set them on the nearest seat. I don't deserve to wear these. Victoria Chen's voice came through the phone again. Mr. Volkov, the board has voted. Unanimous decision. Full termination authority granted to you. Legal has prepared the documents. We also found that Robert Fitzgerald fled the country an hour ago. He knew you were flying today. Someone leaked it to him. Who leaked it? Dimitri asked, though his eyes were already moving through the crew, reading faces like a detective studying suspects. Security footage shows Veronica making a call from the employee parking lot this morning. She knew you were coming, Mr. Volkov. This whole thing, the discrimination, the confrontation, it was supposed to happen in economy where fewer passengers would witness it. They didn't expect you to book first class. They thought you'd test the system from the back of the plane. The revelation hit the cabin like turbulence in clear skies. Veronica had known. She had known exactly who Dmitri was from the moment he stepped onto the plane, and she had still chosen to humiliate him. The discrimination wasn't just casual bias anymore. It was deliberate defiance, a calculated bet that he wouldn't dare fire her in front of passengers. She had gambled everything on the assumption that even the owner would back down rather than create a scene. "You knew," Dmitri said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more terrifying than any shout. "You looked me in the eyes, knowing I owned this airline, knowing I could end your career, and you still told me I didn't belong here. That's not just discrimination, Veronica. That's a sickness so deep that no training could ever cure it." Veronica struggled to her feet, her mascara running in black streams down her cheeks. "Robert said you were weak," she spat out, abandoning all pretense of innocence. "He said you were just another bleeding-heart millionaire playing with airlines. He said you'd never have the guts to fire us in front of passengers because it would hurt the company's image. He said the board would remove you before they'd let you destroy Skybridge's reputation." "My reputation?" Dmitri laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me tell you about reputation. 3 years ago, when I bought this airline, Skybridge was 48 hours from bankruptcy. You were about to lose your jobs anyway, because the previous owner had run it into the ground, chasing wealthy passengers, while ignoring the middle class that actually fills most seats. I saved this company. I saved your jobs. And this is how you repay that salvation, by turning my planes into your personal discrimination playground." Helena Frost's voice interrupted through the phone. "Mr. Volkov, I'm sending you something you need to see immediately." His phone screen changed to show an email thread between Robert Fitzgerald and someone named Konstantin Ashford. Dmitri's face went pale as he read it aloud. "Dmitri Volkov is getting too close to discovering our first-class selection process. Recommend immediate implementation of Operation Gatekeeper. Make sure he sees what happens to undesirable passengers. Either he'll back, down to avoid publicity, or the board will remove him for causing a scandal." "Konstantin Ashford," Dmitri said, his voice hollow. "My own chief operating officer. The man I trusted to run daily operations." He looked around the cabin at the shocked faces of passengers and crew alike. "This goes all the way to the top. They wanted me to see discrimination happening. They wanted to test if I'd have the courage to stop it." Natasha, still live streaming, turned her camera to face herself. "Ladies and gentlemen watching online, we're witnessing corporate conspiracy at the highest level. This isn't just about racist flight attendants. This is about executives protecting a system of discrimination because they think wealthy bigots matter more than human dignity." Currently watching live, 4.7 million viewers. Holy mother of... Guys, this is going mega viral. That number hit everyone in the cabin like a physical force. 4.7 million people were watching this confrontation live. Bryce, who had been trying to inch toward the back of the plane, suddenly realized there was nowhere to hide. His face appeared on millions of screens across the world. His words about homeless-looking people had been heard by more viewers than the Super Bowl halftime show. "Please," Captain Sterling said, stepping forward with her hands raised in surrender. "Mr. Volkov, I'll testify. I'll tell you everything I know. I have recordings on my personal phone of Robert making jokes about passengers. I have emails where he specifically told us to profile certain ethnicities. I kept them because I knew someday this would explode. I was a coward for not reporting it sooner, but I can help you now. I can give you evidence that will bury him and Constantine. Trying to save yourself, Patricia? Veronica laughed bitterly from her spot on the floor. Now you want to be the hero. Where was this courage when you watched me move that Syrian doctor? Where was your integrity when that elderly Korean couple was humiliated? You're not a whistleblower. You're just a rat jumping from a sinking ship. Eleanor Zhao stood up again, supporting herself on her cane. Mr. Volkov, may I say something? Dmitri nodded, and the elderly woman walked slowly to the center of the aisle. 50 years ago, my husband and I started a small import business. We faced discrimination every day. Banks wouldn't loan to us. Suppliers wouldn't meet with us. Customers walked out when they heard our accents. But we persevered because we believed America would change. Today, my company employs 8,000 people across 16 states. I'm on this flight because I was invited to receive the National Business Excellence Award in Singapore. She turned to face the crew. You thought I was just a harmless old Chinese lady who would support you because I could afford first class. But wealth without wisdom is worthless, and privilege without principles is poison. Marcus Steinberg added his voice. I need to confess something, too. I've flown first class on Skybridge 43 times in the past 2 years. I've seen discrimination at least a dozen times. I told myself it wasn't my problem. I complained once, quietly, and when nothing happened, I just accepted it as the price of comfort. My silence made me complicit. Mr. Volkov, whatever you decide to do, you have my full support and testimony. Dmitri stood in the center of the first-class aisle, his broken glasses reflecting the cabin lights like fractured stars. He looked at his phone, then at the crew members scattered throughout the cabin like fallen chess pieces, and finally at the passengers who had become witnesses to this moment of corporate reckoning. The weight of what he was about to do hung in the air like pressure before a storm. He raised his phone to his ear, and Helena Frost answered immediately. Helena, execute the termination protocol. Start with Veronica Hale, Nathan Torres, Sarah Blackwood, Penelope Cross, Bryce Kellerman, and Captain Patricia Sterling. Effective immediately, their employment with Skybridge Airlines is terminated. Lock their access codes, cancel their credentials, and notify security at all Skybridge facilities that they are no longer employees. His voice carried the finality of a judge passing sentence. No! Veronica screamed, lunging forward again. But this time several passengers stood up to block her path. Raymond Ito, the lawyer, spoke calmly but firmly. Ma'am, if you touch him, that's assault on top of theft. You're already facing potential federal discrimination charges. Don't add violence to your resume. Veronica collapsed again, her perfect appearance completely destroyed, her career evaporating in front of millions of viewers. The phone speaker crackled to life with confirmation. Mr. Volkov, terminations processed. Their final paychecks will include today only. No severance per the discrimination clause in their contracts. Additionally, Constantine Ashford's office has been sealed by security. He's currently in a board meeting, unaware of what's happening. Should we proceed with his termination as well? Not yet, Dmitri said, a cold smile playing at his lips. Let him finish his meeting. Let him think he's won. I want him to walk out of that boardroom feeling victorious, only to find security waiting with his termination papers and a federal investigator wanting to discuss fraud charges. And Helena, make sure the FBI knows about Robert Fitzgerald's location. I believe Brazil still has an extradition treaty with the United States. Captain Sterling stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held out her phone. Mr. Volkov, please, look at this before you make your final decision about me. She showed him her screen, which displayed a video file dated 6 months ago. Play it, please. You need to see this. Against his better judgment, Dmitri took the phone and pressed play. The video showed Robert Fitzgerald in what appeared to be a hotel bar, clearly drunk, talking to someone off camera. Robert's slurred voice filled the cabin through the phone's speaker. Patricia Sterling is getting suspicious. That stupid woman actually filed a formal concern about passenger treatment. Can you believe it? I had to threaten her with a safety violation review to shut her up. Told her I'd make sure she never flew again. These pilots think their wings make them special, but they're just bus drivers in the sky. She'll keep quiet now. They always do when their pension's on the line. Patricia's voice shook as she spoke. I was a coward, Mr. Volkov. I chose my retirement over my integrity. But I documented everything after that. Every incident, every complaint, every time I was told to stay quiet. I have 47 videos, 300 emails, and recorded phone calls. I was building a case, waiting for the right moment. I know it doesn't excuse my silence, but I want you to have it all. Even if you fire me, use it to clean house completely. Before Dmitri could respond, another voice spoke up from economy class. The curtain had been pulled back, and several economy passengers had crowded into the galley to watch. A young black woman in a fast food uniform stepped forward. Excuse me, Mr. Volkov. My name is Destiny Williams. I work 3 jobs to afford maybe 1 flight a year to see my mama in Atlanta. I've never been able to afford first class, probably never will. But what you're doing right now, standing up to these people who think they're better than us, that means everything. Fire them all. Every last one who participated in this. An elderly man in overalls added his voice. I'm Tom Bradley, retired mechanic. Worked on planes for 40 years. These people forgot that an airplane is just a bus with wings, like that drunk fool said. Every passenger deserves respect, whether they're in first class or squeezed in the back by the toilets. What these folks did is unforgivable. Bryce suddenly found his voice again, his young face red with indignation. This is insane. We're being crucified for maintaining standards. Every luxury brand in the world discriminates. Ferrari doesn't sell to everyone. Rolex doesn't let everyone in their stores. Why should first class be different? We were protecting the premium experience. Premium experience? Dr. Jessica Park from Yale shot back. I've saved more lives in the past month than you've served champagne glasses in your entire career. Who exactly determines what's premium? You? A 26-year-old who probably still lives with his parents and thinks a polyester uniform makes him special? Dmitri raised his hand for silence. Bryce just made an interesting point about luxury brands. Let me tell you something about real luxury. I own 17 hotels through my hospitality group. The most expensive suite in my Singapore property costs $42,000 per night. Do you know what my staff is trained to do when someone walks in wearing flip-flops and a tank top? They smile, they bow, and they ask how they can make that guest's stay perfect. Because real luxury isn't about excluding people, it's about serving everyone with excellence. He turned to address the entire cabin, his voice carrying to both economy and first class. When I bought this airline, I had a vision. I wanted to create something different, something better. I wanted every passenger, regardless of their seat, to feel valued. These employees didn't just discriminate against individuals. They betrayed that vision. They turned my aircraft into their personal kingdom, where they could play judge and jury based on someone's appearance. Sarah Blackwood, still on the floor, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Mr. Volkov, I know you won't forgive me, but I need you to know something. I have a recording, too, from last week's crew meeting. Veronica told us that if we didn't participate in the passenger quality control, as she called it, we'd be marked as not team players, and our hours would be cut. She controlled our schedules, our routes, Everything. Some of us were scared to resist. Scared? Eleanor Zhao said sharply. My dear, I fled China during the Cultural Revolution. I've seen what real fear looks like. You weren't scared. You were comfortable. You chose your comfort over other people's dignity. That's not fear. That's cowardice. The phone rang again, and Victoria Chen's voice came through. Mr. Volkov, the media has picked this up. CNN, Fox, BBC, Al Jazeera. Everyone's running it as breaking news. Skybridge's stock has dropped 12% in the last 30 minutes. The board is panicking. Konstantin just tried to call an emergency vote to remove you, but he doesn't have the votes. 8 board members are supporting you completely. Dmitri looked at the phone screen, showing the plummeting stock price, then at the crew members scattered throughout the cabin like debris after an explosion. He made a decision that would define not just Skybridge Airlines, but the entire aviation industry for decades to come. Victoria, let the stock fall. Let it hit 0 if necessary. Some things matter more than market value. Call an emergency board meeting for the moment we land. Every member who supports Konstantin gets one chance to resign with dignity. Those who stay will help me rebuild this airline from the ground up. He turned back to the crew, his voice carrying the weight of final judgment. Sarah Blackwood, you say you were forced to participate. You have one opportunity right now to prove that. Give me names. Every single employee who's part of this discrimination network. You have 60 seconds to decide whether you're a witness or a defendant in what comes next. Sarah struggled to her feet, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. There's a list in the WhatsApp group. 73 names across the entire network. Flight attendants, ground crew, gate agents, even some pilots. Veronica kept track of everyone who participated. She called it her insurance policy. She held out her phone to Dmitri, her hand trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Insurance policy. Dmitri took the phone, scrolling through the names. His face darkened with each entry. Half of our Denver hub is on this list. This is a cancer that's metastasized throughout my entire company. He looked up at the passengers watching in horrified fascination. Every one of you who's flying Skybridge today, I need you to know something. This ends now. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Not after some corporate committee reviews it. Right now. Natasha's live stream showed 8.2 million viewers now. Comments were flooding in so fast, they looked like a waterfall of text. She read some aloud. People are sharing their own airline discrimination stories. Someone says their grandmother was moved from business class because she was wearing a sari. Another person says they were questioned about their ticket because they had a Spanish accent. Mr. Volkov, this is bigger than just Skybridge. You're exposing an entire industry's dirty secret. Captain Patricia Sterling stood straighter, seeming to find courage in her confession. Mr. Volkov, if you're firing me, I accept it. But please use what I've documented. There's a folder on my phone called Evidence. Everything's there. Robert Fitzgerald's group had connections at United, American, Delta. They were sharing tactics, comparing notes on how to keep undesirables out of premium cabins without getting caught. They called it the Altitude Alliance. The Altitude Alliance? Raymond Ito nearly shouted. That's conspiracy across state lines. That's federal RICO charges. That's executives going to prison, not just losing their jobs. The Harvard lawyer was already typing furiously on his phone. I'm contacting the Department of Justice right now. This is the biggest discrimination case in aviation history. Suddenly, the cockpit door opened, and the co-pilot, James Morrison, stepped out. Everyone had forgotten there was another pilot on board. He was young, maybe 32, and his face was pale with shock. Captain Sterling wasn't lying, he said quietly. I've been recording everything for the FBI for the past 3 months. I'm an undercover federal agent. We've been investigating complaints about Skybridge for over a year. Mr. Volkov, your decision to fly today gave us exactly what we needed. We have everything. The cabin erupted in gasps. Veronica actually fainted, crumpling to the floor in a heap of navy polyester. Bryce tried to run again, but there was nowhere to go at 37,000 feet. Nathan Torres just sat down in the nearest empty seat, his head in his hands, mumbling something that sounded like a prayer. "Your FBI?" Dmitri asked, studying the young co-pilot. "Then you know how deep this goes?" "Deeper than you imagine, sir. Robert Fitzgerald's group has been selling first-class experiences to human traffickers, drug dealers, anyone who could pay cash. They'd bump legitimate passengers to make room. The discrimination was just the cover story. The real crime was turning premium cabins into a black market commodity. We estimate they've made over $12 million in the past 3 years. Eleanor Zhao gasped from her seat. "My God! When I couldn't upgrade my flight last month, despite available seats, they told me it was a system error. Were they selling my seat to criminals?" "Possibly, ma'am," Agent Morrison replied. "We have records of 43 instances where confirmed upgrades were cancelled last minute, and the seats went to passengers who paid cash at the gate. No documentation, no proper identification. Captain Sterling, your cooperation will be noted in our report. Mr. Volkov, we'll need all the termination records and any access you can give us to company communications." Dmitri nodded slowly, the full scope of the corruption finally revealing itself. "You'll have everything. Full access. No lawyers, no barriers, no corporate protection. Anyone involved in this gets exposed." He turned to address all the passengers. "I bought this airline to make a difference, to prove that business could be ethical, profitable, and inclusive. I failed to see the rot growing under my nose. But today, with all of you as witnesses, we're going to burn out this infection completely." The plane suddenly hit turbulence, causing everyone to grab their seats. It felt appropriate, like the universe itself was shaking up the old order. When it settled, Dmitri continued. "Helena, are you still there?" "Yes, Mr. Volkov. The board meeting is assembled. Konstantin just walked in. Should I patch you through?" "Put me on the main screen." Within seconds, Dmitri's face appeared on the boardroom monitor, the first-class cabin visible behind him. Konstantin Ashford, a silver-haired man in a $3,000 suit, stood at the head of the table, his face going from confident to terrified as he realized what was happening. "Konstantin," Dmitri said calmly, "you're fired. Security is waiting outside that room with your termination papers and FBI agents who'd like to discuss your involvement in the Altitude Alliance. Board members, you have 1 minute to decide. Stand with the old Skybridge that discriminated, stole, and sold seats to criminals, or stand with the new Skybridge that will lead the industry in ethical aviation. Raise your hand if you support immediate, comprehensive reform." One by one, hands went up. 8, then 10, then all 12 board members raised their hands. Konstantin tried to speak, but security was already entering the room. The live stream caught it all, broadcasting corporate justice to what was now 11 million viewers worldwide. "Now," Dmitri said, turning back to the cabin. "For the rest of you." He looked at each fired crew member in turn. "Your termination is final. You'll be escorted off this plane by federal agents when we land. Your names will be added to a no-fly list for Skybridge and shared with every airline that partners with us. But more importantly, your names and faces are now known to millions. You chose discrimination. You chose cruelty. You chose to make people feel small so you could feel big. That choice will follow you forever. 3 months later, the aviation industry had fundamentally changed. The FBI's investigation led to 93 arrests across 6 airlines. Robert Fitzgerald was extradited from Brazil and faced 40 years in federal prison. Constantine Ashford pled guilty to fraud and conspiracy, receiving 15 years. The Altitude Alliance was exposed in a congressional hearing that led to new federal regulations requiring all passenger complaints to be reviewed by an independent board. Skybridge Airlines underwent a complete transformation. Every employee was retrained, with discrimination resulting in immediate termination and criminal referral. Eleanor Zhao was invited to join the board of directors, bringing her decades of experience in ethical business. Marcus Steinberg's hotel chain partnered with Skybridge to create a new standard for inclusive luxury. Dr. Jessica Park became the airline's medical advisor, ensuring crew members understood that exhausted healthcare workers in scrubs were heroes, not security risks. Dimitri implemented a revolutionary policy. Once a month, every executive, including himself, had to fly economy in their oldest clothes, experiencing their airline as their most vulnerable passengers did. The first-class cabin was redesigned with a plaque that read, "Excellence is not about exclusion. Every passenger who enters this cabin has earned their place through their purchase, not our prejudice." Captain Patricia Sterling's evidence proved crucial in the federal investigation. While she was terminated from Skybridge, the FBI recommended her as a key witness, and her cooperation led to reduced charges. She now works as a consultant, training airlines on recognizing and preventing discrimination. She donated her entire consulting fee from the first year to Marcus Coleman, the young man who'd attempted suicide after being humiliated on his way to the Google interview. He used the money to restart his education and eventually got that job at Google. Sarah Blackwood, who had provided the crucial list of names, was the only crew member who received a different outcome. While still terminated, Dimitri ensured she received job training assistance and a reference letter that acknowledged her eventual cooperation. She now works at a non-profit that advocates for airline passenger rights, using her insider knowledge to help victims of discrimination. Veronica Hale, Bryce Kellerman, Nathan Torres, and Penelope Cross all faced federal charges. Their trials became symbols of what happens when small people get drunk on tiny amounts of power. None of them flew commercially again, their faces too recognizable, their names too toxic for any airline to risk hiring them. The young tech entrepreneur Marcus Coleman, whose story had shocked the cabin, became a powerful advocate for inclusive travel. He started an app called Sky Equal that allows passengers to rate airlines and crew members on their inclusivity, creating accountability through transparency. Skybridge was the first airline to officially partner with the app, submitting to public scrutiny. But perhaps the most powerful change came from the passengers who witnessed that day's events. They formed an organization called Witnesses at Altitude, committed to speaking up whenever they saw discrimination. Their motto, suggested by Eleanor Zhao, was simple: silence at ground level enables injustice at every altitude. Dmitry Volkov continued to fly monthly in his old hoodie, broken glasses held together with tape, looking like someone Veronica would have thrown out of first class. But now, every crew member knew that the scruffy passenger in 1A might be anyone: a CEO, a doctor, a teacher, or just someone who saved up for a nice seat. They learned to see beyond appearances, to serve beyond prejudice, to rise above the discrimination that had poisoned their industry for decades. The transformation of Skybridge Airlines proved something important. Change doesn't come from policies or training videos or corporate mission statements. It comes when someone with power chooses to use it for justice, when witnesses choose to speak instead of staying silent, and when consequences are swift, public, and final. The aviation industry learned that discrimination isn't turbulence you fly through. It's a crash you prevent by never taking off with bias on board. 6 months after the incident, Dimitri received a letter from a young girl named Aisha, who had watched the live stream from her home in Detroit. She wrote, "Mr. Volkov, I'm 13 and black, and my mama saves all year so we can visit my grandma in Texas. We always fly economy, squeezed in the back, and flight attendants usually ignore us or treat us like we're bothering them. But last week, when we flew Skybridge, the flight attendant smiled at us like we mattered. She gave my little brother wings and told him he could be a pilot someday. She treated us like we belonged in the sky. Thank you for making the sky friendly for kids like us." That letter hangs in Dimitri's office now, next to a photo of his nephew Alexei, the boy who missed his mother's funeral because someone decided a hoodie made him dangerous. Below both is a simple plaque. The altitude of an airplane should never determine the attitude of its crew. The day that Veronica Hale told Dmitri Volkov he didn't belong in first class became known as the reckoning at 37,000 feet. It's studied in business schools as an example of how discrimination destroys companies from within. It's cited in law schools as the case that changed aviation civil rights. But most importantly, it's remembered by millions who watched it unfold live as the day justice didn't wait for landing. It happened in real time, broadcast to the world, impossible to deny or cover up. If you've watched this entire story unfold, you understand that discrimination doesn't just happen in airplane cabins. It happens in restaurants, hotels, stores, schools, hospitals, anywhere someone with a tiny bit of power decides they're the guardian of who belongs. But you also understand that we all have power. The power to record, to speak up, to stand with those being pushed down. Every one of us can create waves of justice that grow into tsunamis of change. If this story moved you, if it made you think about times you've witnessed discrimination or experienced it yourself, then share it now. Don't just like it. Don't just subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that justice is possible, that witnesses matter, that speaking up changes everything. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story from Waves of Justice, because every week we bring you real stories of people standing up, speaking out, and refusing to let discrimination fly. Remember, you don't need to own an airline to ground injustice. You just need the courage to say, "This is wrong," and the wisdom to know that silence makes you part of the problem. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And remember, justice isn't a destination we arrive at. It's a decision we make every time we choose to speak instead of staying silent. Until next time, this is Waves of Justice, reminding you that every wave starts with a single